The Christmas party had just started when my daughter smiled and said, "Dad, you don't need to come this year. You always make everyone uncomfortable." I just nodded, hiding the receipt for the thousands of dollars I had quietly paid that morning to cover the whole party. To them, I was just an embarrassing old man. They had no idea this very party would expose a 20-year-old secret and leave everyone in the room speechless. Before we continue, if this story feels close to home, comment where you're watching from, your city or country. Like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Some details are fictional for storytelling, and any resemblance is coincidental, but the lesson behind it is worth every minute you spend. My name is Walter Briggs. I am 63 years old, and for 20 years I was the man who paid for Christmas that everyone said I ruined. The planning meeting was at Carolyn's house, second Saturday of December. She had a clipboard. My daughter always had a clipboard. She stood at the head of her own dining room table in that pressed burgundy blouse she saved for occasions she wanted to run, and she read out assignments the way a foreman reads a job sheet. Everett would haul the extra folding tables from the storage unit on Middlebrook Pike. Mitchell would handle the bar and make sure the ice was stocked by 5. Aunt Agnes would bring her brown sugar pecan pie, same as always. The Caldwell kids from across the street would help with parking. Then she got to me, Dad. Carolyn smiled the smile she kept for rooms with other people in them. Warm, practiced, the kind of smile that looked generous and wasn't. "You don't have to do a single thing this year, just show up on time." She paused just long enough. "And try not to talk so much like last year, okay? People are trying to enjoy themselves." Mitchell laughed into his coffee mug. Short and easy, like a man who already knew he owned the room. I was sitting in the chair nobody else wanted. The one near the kitchen door, slightly uneven on the tile floor. The one you end up in when everyone else picks first. I wrapped both hands around my mug and nodded. "All right," I said. "I'll be on time." I didn't say the rest. I never said the rest, because 40 minutes before any of them had pulled into Carolyn's driveway that morning, I had already driven my navy blue Ford F-150 down to the post office on Merchant Street and dropped a signed check through the deposit slot. $3,800 made out to Ridgeline Event Center. Same hall, same December. Same as every year since the December after Margaret died. Nobody asked who paid for the hall. Nobody ever asked. That was the part nobody ever thought to ask. After the meeting broke up, Everett caught me at the door, pulling on my jacket. He kept his voice low so Carolyn couldn't hear from the kitchen. "You doing all right, Dad?" I looked at my son. 36-year-old grease still worked into the creases of his knuckles from the shop, the most honest face I had ever known in my life. I thought about the check I had dropped that morning. I thought about the chair near the kitchen door. "I'm fine," I said. Everett looked at me the way he had looked at me since he was 14 years old, and learned that sometimes the people you love don't tell you the whole truth. He didn't push. He just nodded and zipped up his jacket. "Call me if you need anything," he said. "I will." I wouldn't. But I said it anyway, the way fathers do. On the drive home down Kingston Pike, my phone buzzed against the center console. I glanced at it at a red light. A text from First Tennessee Bank. Deposit processed. $3,800. I stared at that number longer than the light stayed green. The car behind me tapped its horn. I put the truck in gear and drove. The man who ruins Christmas. That was what I had become somewhere along the way, without ever understanding exactly when the story changed, or who had been the one to start telling it. It had started small. These things always start small. 3 years back, Carolyn handed me the glazed ham 40 minutes before dinner and told me to finish it in the oven. I followed her instructions exactly. It came out dry. By the time the guests sat down, the story had already been written and handed around the table. Dad just had to handle the ham himself. Carolyn told everyone, laughing that bright, easy laugh of hers. I told him to leave it alone. He never listens. She hadn't told me that. But the room laughed, and I let it go. 2 years back, I told a story about pulling wire in an old farmhouse out past Powell. A long story, maybe. Mitchell checked his watch where the whole table could see it. Carolyn touched my arm. Okay, Dad. Let people eat. Last year, I still couldn't tell you what I had done wrong. A wrong word somewhere. A wrong look. By morning, it was settled fact I had made things awkward again. Here is the part that took me 20 years to see. Every single time I ruined something, the next day brought a phone call. Gentle, almost apologetic in its tone. Dad, since the dinner got a little rough, would you mind covering the extra catering cost just to smooth things over? You know how these things are. And I always did, because smoothing it over felt like being needed, and being needed felt close enough to being loved that I never examined the difference. 20 years, the same rhythm over and over, and I danced to it without ever once hearing the beat underneath it. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee I forgot to drink, and a feeling in my chest I couldn't quite name. Not anger, something quieter. Something that had been building for a long time and had finally found enough room to stand up straight. I just didn't know yet how far down it went. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and the coffee gone cold, and I started going back through everything. The house was quiet, the way it gets in December, the furnace ticking under the floor, the wind moving through the ridge behind the property. Margaret's little wooden Christmas tree sitting dark in the corner of the living room, where I had set it out of habit, but not yet plugged in. I hadn't plugged it in properly in years. I was always too busy making sure other people's lights were on. I pulled up the Ridgeline Event Center account first, and just sat there looking at it. Margaret had loved Christmas the way some people love breathing, without thinking about it, without effort, just as the most natural thing in the world. She used to start pulling boxes from the attic in October. The whole house would smell like cinnamon and pine before Halloween was even over. When Carolyn was small, Margaret would lift her up to hang the high ornaments, and Carolyn would squeal and grab the branch with both fists like she was afraid of falling. I had a doctor's appointment 2 weeks before that planning meeting. Dr. Harmon had pulled up a scan on his screen, pointed at something, and used the word strain. "I want you cutting back, Walter," he said, leaning back in his chair and looking at me over the top of his glasses. "Less heavy lifting, less stress. Your heart is working harder than it should be for a man your age." "I'll manage," I told him. "That's what worries me," he said. "Men who manage never stop until something stops them." He folded his hands on the desk. "What's eating at you, and don't tell me nothing? I've been your doctor for 11 years. I thought about the clipboard. I thought about the chair near the kitchen door. I thought about the check I had already written for next December's deposit, even though it was only the first week of November. "Just family stuff," I said. "Nothing serious." Dr. Harmon looked at me for a long moment. He didn't believe me. He was right not to. That night at my kitchen table, I built a number. 20 Decembers. The hall and the catering and the lighting company and the rental tables and the ivory linens and the flowers and the gifts I had bought that ended up under the tree wearing other people's name tags. I went back through old bank statements until my eyes burned and the columns blurred together. When I finally added the last line, I sat with the total glowing on my screen in the dark kitchen for a long time. I won't say the number out loud, but stretched across 20 Decembers, it was enough to pay off the mortgage on this house. It was the comfortable retirement Dr. Harmon kept telling me I deserved, and I kept telling him was just around the corner. I had handed it over one slice at a time and called each slice love. Then I did the other math. The math that actually mattered. In 20 years of paying for that party, how many times had I felt like a father sitting at that table instead of a wallet with a heartbeat? The furnace ticked. The wind came off the ridge. Margaret's little tree sat dark in the corner. I could not think of a single time. Not one. I closed the laptop. I didn't make any decisions yet. But something had shifted underneath everything the way ground shifts in a hard winter, slow and certain, and impossible to stop once it has begun. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time before sleep came. 2 Sundays before Christmas, Carolyn called while I was eating lunch. "Dad, I need those extra folding chairs from your garage. The ones from the old cookouts. Can you drop them by today?" "Sure," I said. "I'll bring them over this afternoon." "Perfect. Just leave them by the side gate if nobody answers. I might be running errands." I loaded the 4 chairs into the bed of the F-150 forest green aluminum frames, a little rust along the hinges from years in the garage, the kind of chairs that had held half the neighborhood at 4th of July cookouts, back when the kids were young and Margaret was still here to make her lemonade from scratch. I drove across town through a cold December drizzle that couldn't decide between rain and sleet. When I pulled up to Carolyn's Colonial on Westland Drive, Mitchell's silver Audi was in the driveway alongside a car I recognized as the Caldwells from across the street. I pulled the 4 chairs out of the truck bed and came around the side of the house toward the back patio the way I always did when I was dropping something off and didn't want to make a production of it. Mitchell was out there. He was standing with Tom and Linda Caldwell near the outdoor fire pit, a craft beer in one hand, that performing voice of his going full volume lower and smoother than his regular voice, the one he saved for clients and neighbors he wanted to impress. I stopped at the corner of the house. The privacy fence blocked their view. I wasn't hiding. I simply stopped. Honestly, Mitchell was saying, "It just gets better every year. Carolyn runs the whole thing, every single detail. She's incredible." "We always look forward to it," Linda Caldwell said warmly. "It's the best party of the season." Tikov's, well. Mitchell took a slow drink and dropped his voice the way people drop their voices when they want to make sure you still hear them clearly. "Between you and me, it goes a lot smoother when the old man stays home. He just gets in the way. Me and Carolyn carry the whole thing, and then he shows up and finds something to ruin. Every year like clockwork." Tom Caldwell made a sympathetic sound. "That's tough." "You manage it well," Linda said. And then I heard her, Carolyn, standing right there beside her husband. She laughed. Not an uncomfortable laugh, not the polite kind you make when someone says something you don't quite agree with. A real laugh, easy and warm, the laugh of a woman who found what she was hearing genuinely funny. And she did not say one word to correct him. Not one breath in my defense. I was standing at the corner of my daughter's house, with 4 folding chairs in my arms, and I felt something I had been carrying for 20 years, simply and quietly set itself down. I want to be honest about what happened inside me in that moment, because I have thought about it every single day since. I was not angry. I kept waiting for the anger, and it never came. What came instead was something colder and cleaner than anger. Clarity. The kind you get when fog finally burns off a hillside on a cold morning, and you can see all the way to the tree line, every distance exact, every detail true. We carry the whole thing. He just gets in the way. I set the 4 chairs down against the fence. Quietly. I didn't announce myself. I walked back to the F-150, got in, and drove home without turning on the radio. I didn't need anything in my ears. I needed to sit with what I had just understood. My hands were steady on the wheel. That surprised me a little. That night, I opened my laptop again. Not to look at the numbers this time. I already knew the numbers. I opened the vendor files and read every contract from the beginning, not the payment history, the contracts themselves. The name on the signature line. The name listed as account holder. The name every vendor in Knoxville had on file as the responsible party for the event that my daughter had been accepting compliments for her entire adult life. Walter Briggs. Walter Briggs. Walter Briggs. Every door to that holiday opened with my key. Every single one. I opened a new message to Carolyn. I typed 3 sentences. My thumb hovered over the send button. Then I stopped. There was one thing I needed to do first. Before I sent anything to anyone, before I said a word to a single member of this family, there was one call I needed to make. Several calls, actually. Monday morning, I made phone calls. Calm ones. The kind a man makes when he has finally decided to do the obvious thing and is simply working through the list. I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, the vendor files open on my laptop, and a legal pad where I had written out exactly what I intended to say before I picked up the phone. I had been an electrician for 31 years. I understood that you do not start a job without knowing where every wire runs. You do not pull a breaker without being certain what you are about to cut off and what you intend to keep running. I started with Ridgeline Event Center. The phone rang twice before a woman answered, her voice bright and professional. Ridgeline Event Center, this is Beverly. How can I help you? Beverly, my name is Walter Briggs. I'm the account holder on your December 21st booking. A brief pause, the sound of keys clicking. Yes, Mr. Briggs. I have your account right here. You've been with us a long time. Is there something I can help you with today? I'd like to cancel my reservation, I said, and cancel the automatic payment going forward. The clicking stopped. I'm sorry, Beverly said. You'd like to cancel the December 21st booking entirely. That's right. Another pause, longer this time. Mr. Briggs, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. You've held this account every December since 2004. That's 20 consecutive years. You're certain you want to cancel 20 consecutive years. Hearing it said out loud by a stranger made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with what Dr. Harmon had warned me about. I'm certain, I said, but I don't want to leave anyone in a difficult position. I've thought about how to handle this carefully. I looked down at the legal pad where I had written out the next part word for word. My daughter Carolyn Hartley is the one who actually runs the event. If she wants to keep the hall for December 21st, she can contact you directly and book it in her own name on her own card. I'll give you her number right now if that helps. I see. Beverly's voice had gone careful, the way a professional's voice goes when they sense a family situation they don't want to step into. And you're sure about this, sir? This is a significant booking. I'm sure. I'm not pulling the plug on the event itself. I'm simply taking my name off the bottom of the page. Whoever wants the party needs to stand behind it themselves. I heard her exhale softly. All right, Mr. Briggs. I'll process the cancellation, and I'll note in the file that your daughter may be reaching out to rebook. She paused. Can I ask, is everything all right? It's going to be, I said. I made the same call 4 more times. Magnolia Bakehouse, where I had ordered the same 3-tiered white cake with gold ribbon trim for 19 years. Southern Glow lighting, the company that came out every November to string the warm white lights along the entrance hall that Carolyn always described to her friends as if she had chosen them herself. Volunteer rentals for the round tables and ivory linens. Eleanor's flowers on Market Square for the centerpieces. Same words, more or less, to each of them. Cancel my account. If my daughter wants to keep the order, she can set it up in her own name on her own card. I'm not leaving anyone stranded. I just need my name off the bottom of the page. The woman at Eleanor's flowers. A warm-voiced woman named Patricia, who had been taking my December order for 15 years, went quiet for a moment after I finished. "Mr. Briggs," she said carefully, "can I ask, is everything all right at home?" I looked out the kitchen window. The sky over Knoxville was the flat white of early winter, the kind of sky that means snow is thinking about it. "It is now," I said. Finally. I hung up and sat for a moment with my hand still on the phone. The whole thing had taken less than an hour. 20 years of automatic payments, 20 years of my name at the bottom of every page undone in less than an hour, over 1 cup of coffee at my own kitchen table. I picked up my phone and opened the draft message I had written to Carolyn the night before. 3 sentences. I read them once, then twice. Then I pressed send. I set the phone face up on the table and watched it. Outside, the first thin flakes of snow had started to come down, drifting past the kitchen window like the sky was finally letting something go. Tuesday evening, just after 6, I heard the familiar rumble of Everett's truck pulling into the driveway. He came through the side door without knocking, the way he always had since he was a teenager. He was still in his work shirt, dark blue with the garage logo on the chest, the name Briggs Auto stitched in gold thread, and there was engine grease worked into the creases of his knuckles that soap and water never quite got to. He smelled like motor oil and cold air, and when he looked at me standing at the stove, he stopped in the doorway. Dad. He studied my face the way a mechanic studies an engine he hasn't heard run before. "You're different. What happened?" I turned the burner down and pulled out the chair across from mine. "Sit down, son. I'll tell you." So I told him. All of it plain and in order, the way you tell a story when you're done being ashamed of it. The patio. Mitchell's voice carrying around the corner of the fence. Carolyn's laugh. The contracts with my name on every line. The phone calls Monday morning. The message I had sent to Carolyn. Everett listened without interrupting. He sat with his elbows on the table and his hands folded in front of him, and he listened the way his grandfather used to listen, completely, without fidgeting, without looking at his phone. When I finished, he put his face in both hands and sat like that for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were red. "Dad." His voice came out rough. "I have wanted to say something for years. Every single Christmas. Every time she did that to you." He stopped and pressed his lips together hard, fighting it. "Every time I tried, she shut me down before I got 2 words out. I'm sorry. I should have fought harder for you." "You were one voice against a room," I told him. "That's a hard place to stand. It's not right." He shook his head, jaw tight. "What they did. What she let him say about you." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a rough, quick gesture the kind men make when they don't want to be caught doing it. "But she's still your daughter." "She is," I said. "And I helped make her this way. I paid for every problem until she stopped seeing them as problems. That's on me, too." Everett was quiet for a moment, turning that over. Then he reached into the front pocket of his work shirt and pulled out his phone. He held it for a second without looking at me, and I could see from the set of his shoulders that whatever he was about to show me had been weighing on him for a long time. "Dad," he said quietly, "there's something I've been holding on to. I should have shown you a long time ago and I didn't, and I'm sorry for that too." He set the phone on the table and turned it to face me. 2 Christmases ago. She sent it to me. I leaned forward and read the text message on the screen. It was from Carolyn. 8 words that my daughter had written about me to my son. He's just a sad old man who buys his way in. I sat back in my chair. My chest didn't tighten this time. It did something worse. It went hollow, like a room after all the furniture has been cleared out. I stared at the ceiling for a moment because I needed somewhere to look that wasn't Everett's face. "How long have you had that?" I asked. 2 years, he said. His voice broke slightly on the second word. I held on to it because I thought I don't know what I thought, that I might need it someday, that it was proof of something. He pressed the heel of his hand against his eye. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have shown you. I should have said something. Just say Everett." I made myself look at him. My son, 36 years old, sitting at my kitchen table with his work shirt still on, crying over something he had been carrying alone for 2 years because he didn't want to hurt me. My throat pulled tight. "You were protecting me." "I was protecting myself," he said. "I didn't want to be the one who broke it." We sat with that for a moment, the two of us in the kitchen where he had grown up doing homework at this same table while Margaret made dinner. What do you need from me?" he finally asked. "Whatever it is, I'm here." "Nothing loud," I said. "I don't need you fighting anyone. I'm done fighting." I looked at my son. "I just need you to tell the truth if anyone ever asks you straight." Everett held my eyes for a long moment. Then he looked down at the phone still on the table between us, picked it up, and deleted the message right there while I watched. "We're not going to win this by throwing her own words back at her," he said, setting the phone face down. "We win it by being the people she said we weren't." He looked up at me, eyes still red but steady now. "If anyone asks me straight," he said, "I'll tell them exactly what I've seen." There was something in the way he said it, the weight behind it, the particular kind of quiet that follows a decision that has been a long time coming. I didn't ask what else he was carrying. I should have. But some conversations need more than one evening to find their way to the surface. Wednesday evening. I was sitting in the living room with the television on low when my phone buzzed on the side table. "Carolyn," I answered on the third ring. "Hi, Dad." Her voice was bright and breezy the way it always was when she wanted something and was planning to get it by making the whole thing sound simple. "So 2 things. The Petersons are bringing 3 extra guests, which means we'll need a bigger cake from Magnolia. I'm thinking the 4-tier instead of the 3. And Eleanor's needs a confirmation on the centerpieces by end of week. Can you handle both like usual, like usual?" She said it the way you say words that have stopped meaning anything through repetition, the way you say good morning without looking at the person. "I can't this year," I said. A small laugh, surprised, almost amused. "What do you mean you can't? It's just 2 phone calls, Dad." "I mean I won't be coming to Christmas this year, Carolyn, and I've reorganized my own expenses." The line went quiet for a full 3 seconds. When she spoke again, the brightness was gone. "What did you just say?" "The hall, the cake, the lights, the flowers, it's all been coming out of my account for 20 years. I've canceled my bookings. If you still want the party, you'll need to set it up yourself. In your name. On your card." "Dad, that's..." Her voice climbed. "You can't just do. You have any idea how this looks? You want to ruin Christmas for the grandkids. Is that what this is? You're going to ruin Christmas over some grudge." I kept my voice even the way you do on a job site when someone is panicking and you're the one who needs to stay calm. "I don't want anyone miserable," I said. "I want to stop paying for a party I'm only welcome to fund." "That is so unfair." Her voice cracked at the edges, frustration pulling it apart. "After everything we do for you. After everything Mitchell and I put into that night. Carolyn. I said her name quietly, without heat. The hall will need to hear from you if you want to keep the date. Same with Magnolia and Eleanor's. I'd call them tomorrow morning. They book up fast this time of year. Dad. Her voice broke open, not into tears, but into something rawer than tears, the sound of someone who has never once been told no by the person they most expected to always say yes. Dad, what are you doing? What does this even mean? You can't just, after 20 years, you can't just... Good night, Carolyn, I said. I mean that kindly. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter, face up. It lit up again before I had taken 2 steps. I watched it glow and pulse and go dark and light up again. I put the kettle on. While the water heated, I stood at the window and watched the snow that had been falling since Monday come down steady and soft over the backyard, covering the old garden beds Margaret had put in the year before she got sick, turning the whole yard white and clean and new. The phone kept ringing. I let it ring. After a while, I made my tea and took it to the living room and sat in the chair by the window. The snow outside was deep enough now to muffle the street noise, and the house was the quietest it had been in years. Not the heavy quiet of loneliness, a different kind of quiet. The kind that comes after you have finally said the thing you should have said a long time ago, and the air has had a chance to clear. My heart hurt in the way Dr. Harmon had warned me about. Not sharp, just a low, steady ache, like a muscle that has been held too tight for too long and is only now beginning to let go. I thought about Margaret, about what she would have done in my place 20 years ago before any of this had a chance to take root. Agnes was right. Margaret would have done it 20 years sooner. I sat in the quiet of my own house and let the phone ring itself out. By Thursday morning, my phone had filled up. Cousins I had not heard from since the 4th of July. An uncle on Margaret's side who lived down in Chattanooga and only called when something had gone wrong enough that Carolyn had reached him first. A family friend named Brenda who opened with, "I just wanted to check in the tone people use when they have been briefed. Every message wore the same coat, the same careful, concerned language that was somehow also an accusation. "We're worried about you, Walter. This isn't like you. Carolyn is beside herself. Don't let pride ruin the holidays. Think about the grandchildren." One cousin, a woman named Patrice, who had always had a sharp tongue and no patience for softening things, came right out with it in a text that landed Thursday afternoon. "Selfish, Walter. That's what this is. Selfish at your age over money. I hope you know what you're doing to this family." I sat in my recliner and read them all. Every message. And I felt the old thing start to move up my spine, the thing that had lived in my back for 20 years, that particular cold weight that knew exactly where I kept my guilt and went straight for it. For about an hour I nearly folded. I am not too proud to tell you that. I thought about picking up the phone and calling Carolyn. "Just pay it, Walter. Keep the peace. It's only money. It's Christmas. Think about the grandkids opening their presents. Think about what Margaret would want." The voice was soft and reasonable and wore the face of love, and it had cost me 20 years of my life. My thumb actually moved toward Carolyn's name on the screen. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Agnes. "I know exactly what is happening over there, and I have watched it build for years and held my tongue when I should not have. Do not you dare fold now, Walter James Briggs. Not this time. I am with you all the way down." I read it twice. My hands were shaking slightly, which surprised me. I am a steady man. I have pulled wire in crawl spaces in the middle of July and never once felt my hands shake. But they were shaking now, holding that phone in the quiet of my living room. My sister doesn't waste words. When Agnes says she is with you, she means every syllable. I set the phone down in my lap. I didn't answer the cousins. I didn't call Carolyn. I just sat in the quiet of my own house, the one I had kept lit and warm for everybody else for 20 years, and I let the phone ring itself out. It is a strange thing choosing yourself for the first time at 63. Strange and terrifying, and something else underneath both of those, something that felt very quietly like relief. Greg didn't call. Greg showed up. Friday night, just after 8, headlights swept across my living room wall, and then his fist came down on my front door, heavier than it needed to be. The knock of a man who wants you to know he's serious before you even open up. I opened the door. Mitchell filled the frame in a charcoal overcoat, jaw set. The closing the deal energy turned mean around the edges. The cold air came in around him, smelling like winter and expensive cologne. "We need to talk, Walter," he said. "Come in then." He came in, but he didn't sit. He stood in the middle of my living room and looked around the way he looked at properties he was sizing up for resale value, slow and deliberate and slightly contemptuous. "Jakuti, you're embarrassing this family," he said. "Carolyn's a wreck. The vendors are calling her like she's some deadbeat who skipped out on a bill. Do you have any idea how this makes her look? How it makes all of us look?" I stood by the fireplace and let him run. "You made a commitment?" He went on, his voice dropping into that low, controlled register he used in negotiations. "Every year the same arrangement. You don't just pull the rug out from under everyone 2 weeks before Christmas because your feelings got hurt. That's not how adults handle things." "What commitment did I make, Mitchell?" I asked. That stopped him for half a second. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You always pay," he said. "Everyone knows that. It's understood. Is everyone assumed that?" I said. "That's different from a commitment." His face went a shade darker. "You're really going to do this? Over what exactly? Because you heard something you didn't like." I thought about telling him I had been standing at the corner of his fence with 4 folding chairs in my arms when he said the old man just gets in the way. I decided he didn't need to know that yet. That wasn't the point I was making. "The contracts have names on them," I said instead. "Whoever's name is on a contract is the one responsible for paying it. That's how it works everywhere, Mitchell, not just here. You just never had to read them before. This is a disgrace." He stepped closer, using his height, the way he did in rooms where it usually worked. "Carolyn carries this entire family. Everything she does for this family. Then she can carry Christmas," I said quietly. "She'll do a fine job." He stared at me the way a man stares at a piece of furniture that has unexpectedly talked back to him. For a moment, he didn't seem to know what to do with his hands. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cold December air pushed in, carrying a few flakes of snow with it. "Good night, Mitchell," I said. "Drive safe on those roads." He left. He had to. There was nothing left to say to a man who had finally, completely, and permanently run out of yes. I locked the door. I leaned my back against it for a moment in the dark front hallway, feeling my heart beat steadily against my ribs. Not fast. Not strained the way Dr. Harmon had warned me about. Just steady and present and mine. For the first time in 20 years, I had said no to that man in my own house, and I did not feel 1 ounce of shame for it. By Thursday morning, my phone had filled up. Cousins I had not heard from since the 4th of July. An uncle on Margaret's side who lived down in Chattanooga and only called when something had gone wrong enough that Carolyn had reached him first. A family friend named Brenda who opened with, "I just wanted to check in the tone people use when they have been briefed. Every message wore the same coat, the same careful, concerned language that was somehow also an accusation. "We're worried about you, Walter. This isn't like you." Carolyn is beside herself. Don't let pride ruin the holidays. Think about the grandchildren. One cousin, a woman named Patrice, who had always had a sharp tongue and no patience for softening things, came right out with it in a text that landed Thursday afternoon. Selfish Walter. That's what this is. Selfish at your age over money. I hope you know what you're doing to this family. I sat in my recliner and read them all. Every message. And I felt the old thing start to move up my spine, the thing that had lived in my back for 20 years, that particular cold weight that knew exactly where I kept my guilt and went straight for it. For about an hour I nearly folded. I am not too proud to tell you that. I thought about picking up the phone and calling Carolyn. Just pay it, Walter. Keep the peace. It's only money. It's Christmas. Think about the grandkids opening their presents. Think about what Margaret would want. The voice was soft and reasonable and wore the face of love, and it had cost me 20 years of my life. My thumb actually moved toward Carolyn's name on the screen. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Agnes. I know exactly what is happening over there, and I have watched it build for years and held my tongue when I should not have. Do not you dare fold now, Walter James Briggs. Not this time. I am with you all the way down. I read it twice. My hands were shaking slightly, which surprised me. I am a steady man. I have pulled wire in crawl spaces in the middle of July and never once felt my hands shake. But they were shaking now, holding that phone in the quiet of my living room. My sister doesn't waste words. When Agnes says she is with you, she means every syllable. I set the phone down in my lap. I didn't answer the cousins. I didn't call Carolyn. I just sat in the quiet of my own house, the one I had kept lit and warm for everybody else for 20 years, and I let the phone ring itself out. It is a strange thing choosing yourself for the first time at 63. Strange and terrifying, and something else underneath both of those, something that felt very quietly like relief. Greg didn't call. Greg showed up. Friday night, just after 8, headlights swept across my living room wall, and then his fist came down on my front door, heavier than it needed to be. The knock of a man who wants you to know he's serious before you even open up. I opened the door. Mitchell filled the frame in a charcoal overcoat jaw, set that closing the deal energy turned mean around the edges. The cold air came in around him, smelling like winter and expensive cologne. We need to talk, Walter, he said. Come in then. He came in, but he didn't sit. He stood in the middle of my living room and looked around the way he looked at properties he was sizing up for resale value, slow and deliberate, and slightly contemptuous. You're embarrassing this family, he said. Carolyn's a wreck. The vendors are calling her like she's some deadbeat who skipped out on a bill. Do you have any idea how this makes her look? How it makes all of us look? I stood by the fireplace and let him run. You made a commitment. He went on, his voice dropping into that low, controlled register he used in negotiations. Every year the same arrangement. You don't just pull the rug out from under everyone 2 weeks before Christmas because your feelings got hurt. That's not how adults handle things. What commitment did I make, Mitchell? I asked. That stopped him for half a second. His eyes narrowed slightly. You always pay, he said. Everyone knows that. It's understood. Can everyone assumed that, I said. That's different from a commitment. His face went a shade darker. You're really going to do this? Over what exactly, because you heard something you didn't like? I thought about telling him I had been standing at the corner of his fence with 4 folding chairs in my arms when he said the old man just gets in the way. I decided he didn't need to know that yet. That wasn't the point I was making. The contracts have names on them, I said instead. Whoever's name is on a contract is the one responsible for paying it. That's how it works everywhere, Mitchell, not just here. You just never had to read them before. This is a disgrace. He stepped closer, using his height, the way he did in rooms where it usually worked. Carolyn carries this entire family. Everything she does for this family. Then she can carry Christmas, I said quietly. She'll do a fine job. He stared at me the way a man stares at a piece of furniture that has unexpectedly talked back to him. For a moment, he didn't seem to know what to do with his hands. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cold December air pushed in, carrying a few flakes of snow with it. "Good night, Mitchell," I said. "Drive safe on those roads." He left. He had to. There was nothing left to say to a man who had finally, completely and permanently run out of yes. I locked the door. I leaned my back against it for a moment in the dark front hallway, feeling my heart beat steadily against my ribs. Not fast, not strained the way Dr. Harmon had warned me about. Just steady and present and mine. For the first time in 20 years, I had said no to that man in my own house, and I did not feel 1 ounce of shame for it. The last 2 days before Christmas Eve were the loudest quiet of my life. Carolyn called. I let it ring. Mitchell called twice on Friday, once on Saturday morning before 8 o'clock, which told me how desperate things had gotten. A couple of cousins. A number I didn't recognize that was probably a vendor trying to understand what was happening with the account. I let them all ring, every one of them, and I did not feel cruel about it. I had said everything I had to say clearly and kindly. There was nothing left to negotiate. A man can only repeat himself so many times before silence becomes the more honest answer. So I did something I had not done in 20 Decembers. I took care of my own house. I went through the place room by room on Friday afternoon, the way Margaret used to do every year before the holidays. Vacuumed the rugs, wiped down the kitchen cabinets, cleaned the bathroom. Margaret had picked out the tile for white with a thin blue border she had seen in a magazine and decided was exactly right, and which I had kept exactly as she left it for 20 years. Then I went to the closet in the spare bedroom and pulled out the box I kept on the high shelf, the one with the masking tape label in Margaret's handwriting that said simply, "Christmas Hours." Inside was the little wooden Christmas tree. Margaret and I had bought it the first December we were married from a craft fair at the old Knoxville Civic Auditorium. A man had been selling them from a folding table hand-carved from Tennessee cedar, no two exactly alike. Margaret had picked this one because it leaned slightly to the left, and she said a tree that leaned meant it was reaching for something. I had not put it out in years. I was always too busy making sure the lights were on somewhere else. I set it on the side table in the living room and plugged it in. The small warm bulbs came on one by one, a little hesitant at first, the way old lights are, and then steady. The cedar smell came up faintly from the wood, and for just a moment the room smelled like those early years, like Margaret humming in the kitchen, like something I had almost forgotten I was missing. My eyes went hot, and I let them. I bought a turkey breast from the Kroger on Paper Mill Drive, not a whole bird, just enough for 2 people because it was going to be me and Everett and nobody else. I got the good kind of rolls that you bake yourself from refrigerated dough, because Margaret always said the smell of bread baking was the most important part of any holiday meal. Saturday afternoon, Agnes called. That one, I answered. "You holding up, little brother?" she asked. She had called me little brother since I was 7 years old, even though I had been 8 inches taller than her for most of our adult lives. "I'm all right," I said. And the strange thing was, I meant it. Good. A pause. Because they are absolutely scrambling over there. The story keeps changing about whose fault it is. First it was yours, then it was Beverly's, then Mitchell told someone it was a miscommunication. Agnes's voice was dry as East Tennessee in August. It's not a miscommunication. It's an accounting problem that has been 20 years in the making. How is she? I asked. Agnes was quiet for a moment. She booked the hall, she said. In her own name. Put down the deposit on her credit card. I was surprised by that. Why would she do that if she can't cover it? Because she is absolutely certain you are going to show up on Christmas Eve, see those grandchildren, and quietly settle the bill the way you have settled every bill for 20 years. Agnes's voice was flat and certain. She told her cousin Patrice, you always fold, that it is the safest bet anyone can make on you. I let that sit for a long moment. She wasn't wrong to bet that way. That had always been the safe bet on Walter Briggs. He carries things. He smooths things over. He pays for the mess and calls it love. Not this year, I said. I know, Agnes said. I told her that too. She didn't believe me either. A pause. Outside the kitchen window, the snow was coming down steadily over the neighborhood, covering the street and the parked cars and the empty garden beds, turning the whole yard soft and white. You're doing the right thing, little brother, Agnes said. Her voice was quieter now, the dry humor set aside. Margaret would have done it 20 years sooner. You know she would have. My throat tightened. I pressed my lips together for a moment before I trusted my voice. I know, I said. She would have. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen window for a long time with my coffee cooling in my hand, watching the snow come down over Knoxville. Somewhere across town, the Ridgeline Event Center was being decorated for a party I had always paid for and was no longer attending. Tables were being set. The lights I had paid Southern Glow to hang were coming on. A chair near the kitchen door at the far end of the longest table would sit empty tonight, with no name beside the place setting. I had no idea what was going to happen when they realized I truly was not coming. By tomorrow evening, I was about to find out. Before I tell you what happened at 6 o'clock, that Christmas Eve comment, the word still. So I know you're here with me. I read every single one. Heads up, this story contains some fictional elements built around a real human truth. If that's not your thing, no pressure, this is a good place to step away. Christmas Eve came in soft and white. I was up before 6 that morning, the way I had been up before 6 every morning of my working life. Except this time, there was no job site to get to, and no truck to warm up in the dark. I put the kettle on, pulled on the old flannel robe Margaret had given me the third Christmas we were married, and stood at the kitchen window with my first cup of coffee, while the sky over Knoxville went from black to the particular flat gray of a December morning that has decided to snow. The backyard was already covered. Margaret's garden beds along the back fence, the ones she had put in the summer before she got sick, the ones I had kept edged and weeded every spring for 20 years, out of a stubbornness I could not quite explain, were buried under 4 inches of clean white. The bird bath she had picked out at a garden center on Chapman Highway, the cast iron one with the cardinal on the rim, had a small dome of snow balanced on top of it like a hat. The whole yard looked like something that had been given permission to rest. Somewhere across Knoxville, the Ridgeline Event Center was being set up for a party I had always paid for and was no longer attending. I stood at that window for a long time, longer than the coffee required, turning that fact over in my mind, the way you turn a stone over to see what is underneath it. The chair at the far end of the longest table near the kitchen door, the one with the draft that came in under the baseboard every time someone went in or out of the catering entrance. I had sat in that chair for 20 Decembers and been grateful for the invitation. I had told myself that gratitude was enough, that being allowed in the room was worth whatever it cost to stay there. It had taken me 63 years to understand that a man should not have to pay to be allowed in his own family. I was not going to sit in that chair tonight. I was not going to sit anywhere tonight, except right here in the house Margaret and I had chosen together when Carolyn was 2 years old and the roof needed replacing, and we had scraped together the down payment from 3 years of saving and not taking vacations. This house, my house, the one I had kept warm for everyone else for 20 years and was only now finally learning to keep warm for myself. I started cooking at 10 o'clock. I put the turkey breast in the oven the way Margaret used to do. At low heat a long time, butter worked carefully under the skin, with your fingers, a handful of fresh rosemary from the pot on the windowsill that she had started from a cutting in the late 90s, and which I had kept alive through sheer ornery stubbornness ever since, even through the 2 winters when I had nearly forgotten to water it, and it had gone brown at the edges and come back anyway. I found her recipe card for the cranberry sauce in the back of the wooden recipe box she had kept on the second shelf, an index card in her handwriting. Faded blue ink, her particular way of writing the letter G that I had forgotten, and then suddenly completely remembered the moment I saw it. Orange zest. A pinch of cinnamon? A tablespoon of honey at the end off the heat. I made the rolls from the refrigerated dough, the kind you bake yourself, because Margaret had always said the smell of bread rising in an oven was the heart of any holiday meal, and everything else was decoration. By 2 in the afternoon, the house smelled like Christmas, the way it had not smelled in a very long time. Not the catered, managed, professionally decorated Christmas of the Ridgeline Event Center. The real kind. The kind that lives in your nose and takes you back 30 years without asking permission. Everett arrived at 4:30. I heard his truck before I saw it, that particular rumble of an engine that needs a new muffler and hasn't gotten one yet, because the man driving it spends all his time fixing other people's vehicles and none of it on his own. The side door opened, and he came in stomping snow off his boots on the mudroom mat, a bottle of sparkling cider tucked under one arm, and beside him a woman I had met only twice before, but had already decided I liked enormously. Claire. Everett's girlfriend of 8 months, a physical therapist at the University of Tennessee Medical Center. A woman with an easy laugh and the kind of direct eyes that look at you like they actually intend to see you. She came through the door and shook my hand the way a person shakes a hand when they mean it, firm, brief, no performance, and said, "Mr. Briggs Everett has told me so much about you, all of it good." "Call me Walter," I said. "And don't believe everything he tells you." She laughed, and it filled the kitchen, the way good laughter fills a room, without trying, without asking anyone's permission, just naturally taking up the space it needed. Everett looked at her sideways when she laughed the way a man looks at someone he knows he found something rare in, and is still slightly amazed by his own luck. "Something smells incredible," Claire said, already moving toward the stove with the comfortable curiosity of someone who loves kitchens. "Cranberry sauce?" I said. "My wife's recipe." "Can I smell it?" I handed her the wooden spoon. She leaned over the pot, closed her eyes for a second, and said, "Orange zest and cinnamon." She knew what she was doing. "She always did," I said. We sat down to eat at 5:30, the 3 of us around the kitchen table, the cedar tree glowing in the corner of the living room, the snow coming down steadily outside the window over the sink. We talked the way people talk when nobody is managing the conversation or steering it toward a particular impression, about Everett's garage, about a difficult patient Claire was working with, about the road trip Margaret and I had taken to the Smoky Mountains in October of 1986, when we had been married 14 months and had $40 between us and no plan, and had somehow had the best 4 days of our lives sleeping in a tent and eating peanut butter sandwiches beside a creek. "You still remember the name of the creek?" Everett asked. "Porter's Creek," I said. "Off the Greenbrier Trail. Your mother made me promise to take her back every fall." I stopped. "We made it back twice." The table went quiet for a moment. Not uncomfortably. just the way a table goes quiet when someone says something true. She would have liked tonight, Everett said. She would have reorganized my entire kitchen by now, I said, and told me I was holding the wooden spoon wrong. Claire laughed again, and Everett laughed, and I laughed too. And for a moment, the kitchen was so full of warmth that I could almost feel Margaret in it, standing at the counter with her sleeves rolled up, telling me to sit down and let her handle it. It was the best Christmas dinner I could remember in 20 years. Then, at exactly 6 o'clock, my phone lit up on the kitchen table. Ridgeline Event Center. The name glowed on the screen, bright and insistent. I looked at it. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, Magnolia Bakehouse. I watched it glow and let it go. Then Carolyn. Her name pulsed on the screen, the way it always did when she called her contact photo a picture from 3 summers ago, at a family barbecue, when she had been laughing at something and had not known I was taking the picture, the only photograph I had of my daughter, where she looked completely unguarded. I looked at that photo for the length of 3 rings. Then I let it go. Mitchell. An unknown number. Carolyn again. The phone barely went dark between calls. I picked it up and set it face up on the table between the cranberry sauce and the bread rolls and watched it light up the kitchen like a small, desperate fire, one call tripping over the next. Everett looked at the phone. Then he looked at me. He did not say anything, but his jaw was set in the way it got when he was holding something in. Claire looked at Everett, then at the phone, then at me. She reached over and refilled her water glass from the pitcher on the table as calmly as if we were watching the evening news. "More cranberry sauce?" I asked. "Please," Claire said, and held out her dish without missing a beat. I spooned cranberry sauce onto her plate. The phone lit up again. I did not look at it. Around 6:15, a different name appeared on the screen. Agnes. I pushed back my chair and answered on the first ring. Walter. My sister's voice was low and controlled, but I had known that voice for 61 years, and I could hear what was running underneath the control, something taut and alive, the sound of a woman standing in the middle of a situation that is moving faster than she had anticipated. Behind her, I could hear the party music from the speakers, the hum of voices that had gone strange and tense, the particular frequency of a room where something has gone wrong and everyone is pretending it has not. Agnes, I said, tell me what's happening. You need to come down here right now. No preamble, no softening. Agnes had never believed in softening anything. Agnes, I've already said everything that needed to be said. I meant what I told you. I'm not going there to... I know exactly what you said. She cut me off, not harshly, just with the efficiency of a woman who did not have time for the version of this conversation where I talked myself out of it. This is not about the money anymore, Walter. This is not about the booking or the bill or any of that. Something is happening in this room right now, and you need to hear it with your own ears. Not from me tomorrow. Not from Everett next week over coffee. You, tonight, in that room. I stood up from the table and walked to the kitchen doorway. Everett had gone completely still in his chair, watching me with his arms folded. What is happening? I asked her. Carolyn is about to find out in front of every neighbor and cousin and family friend who has spent 20 years believing she built this party herself what it actually cost and who actually paid for it. A beat. You have earned the right to be in that room when the truth comes out. Don't you dare give that away by sitting in your kitchen. My throat pulled tight. I looked at my coat on the hook by the side door. You are not going there to pay a single thing, Agnes said, and her voice dropped lower the way it dropped when she needed me to actually hear her and not just listen. Leave your wallet on the counter. Leave your checkbook. Leave every piece of paper with your name on it. You are going there as Walter Briggs, not as a bank account. There is a difference between those two things. It is the most important difference in the world. I looked at Everett across the kitchen. He stood up before I said a word. "I'm coming with you," he said. "You don't have to, Dad." He said it the way he said it when he was done discussing something. He was already reaching for his jacket off the back of the chair. He glanced at Claire. "I'm sorry. This is go." She said it simply without drama, without making him feel guilty for it. She nodded toward the door. "Go be with your dad. I'll be right here." I took my keys off the hook by the door. I looked at my wallet on the kitchen counter, the old brown leather one Margaret had given me the last Christmas before she got sick, worn smooth at the corners from 20 years of back pockets. The initials WB just barely visible on the front flap. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I left it on the counter. On purpose. Deliberately. The most intentional thing I had done all month. For the first time in 20 years, I was walking into that building with nothing to offer but myself. I opened the side door. The cold air came in sharp and clean. "Let's go," I said. The drive across Knoxville took 12 minutes. I know because I counted the stoplights. 8 of them between my house and the Ridgeline Event Center on Centerline Drive, and at every one of them I had the same conversation with myself. You don't have to go in. You said what you needed to say. You made your point. Turn around and go home to your turkey and your cedar tree, and your son and his girl, and let whatever is happening over there happen without you. But Agnes was right. She was always right, my sister. There was a difference between being absent and being unseen, and I had been unseen for 20 years. I was not going to give that up tonight. I pulled into the parking lot. Everett pulled in beside me in his truck, the headlights cutting through the falling snow. We walked across the lot together without speaking, our boots leaving 2 sets of prints in the fresh white, the warm amber light of the Ridgeline windows spilling out across the snow ahead of us. I stopped at the entrance doors and looked through the glass. The room was exactly as it had looked every December for 20 years. Round tables with ivory linens, the warm white lights that southern glow strung along the rafters every November, the ones that made the room look like the inside of something magical. The 3-tiered cake on the side table near the entrance, white with gold ribbon trim. The centerpieces from Eleanor's flowers, low arrangements of pine and white amaryllis and gold ribbon. Everything I had paid for, lit up and beautiful and full of people who had no idea. "You ready?" Everett said beside me. "No," I said honestly. "Let's go anyway." I pushed open the door. The warmth of the room hit me first, and then the sound, and then something else, a change in the air. The particular shift that happens in a crowded room when something unexpected walks in. The music kept playing from the speakers in the corner. The people did not. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. I felt the room register my arrival the way a room registers a change in weather, not loudly, just a collective, involuntary attention. Carolyn was standing near the bar on the far side of the room. She was not flawless anymore. The color was gone from her face, and her jaw was set in the tight, controlled way of a woman working very hard to hold a performance together while the stage was collapsing under her feet. Beverly from the Ridgeline office stood beside her with an open folder pressed against her chest, waiting with the patient professionalism of someone who needs a signature and has been waiting too long to get one. Tom and Linda Caldwell stood nearby, close enough to the bar that they had clearly heard at least part of the conversation between Carolyn and Beverly. Linda was holding her glass of wine without drinking from it. Tom was looking at the floor. Mitchell stood behind Carolyn, arms crossed, jaw tight, wearing the loose half-smile of a man who has convinced himself he still controls the room. I watched that smile when he saw me come through the door. It flickered, just slightly, like a light on a bad connection. Carolyn saw me the same moment Mitchell did. Something moved across her face. Relief raw and immediate, the reflex of a woman who had been betting all night that the cavalry was still coming. She took a step toward me, her voice pitched to carry with a brightness that cracked slightly at the edges. Dad. She reached out toward me, the old script already running. Thank God you're here. Tell them there's been a misunderstanding. Tell them you'll get this sorted out. You can explain. There's no misunderstanding, I said. My voice came out calm. Not loud, not hard. Just clear the way a voice gets when a man has finally stopped pretending. The people closest to us went quiet, then the people behind them. The music played on, but the room had stilled around it. Dad. Carolyn's voice sharpened, reaching for the old ground. You're doing it again. You're ruining Christmas. You always ruin Christmas. Every single year you find a way to. I didn't ruin anything, I said. I looked at my daughter. 40 years old, standing in a room full of people who loved her and were watching her in a beautiful venue she could not pay for, wearing the face she had worn her whole adult life. The face that said everything was under control, and anyone who suggested otherwise was the problem. I didn't ruin anything, I said again quietly. I just stopped paying for a party I was never really invited to. The room went so still, you could hear the hum of the lights in the rafters. And then Beverly spoke. Beverly was not trying to make a scene. I want to be clear about that, because what happened next changed everything in that room, and it was not the result of anyone trying to be dramatic. Beverly was a professional doing her job. She had a balance due on an account and a room full of people who had been served a catered dinner and a full bar, and she needed someone to settle it before the evening went any further. She was confused about who was responsible for what, and confusion makes people honest in ways that calculation never does. She looked between me and Carolyn, the open folder in her hands, and she said it the way you say something when you are simply trying to clarify a factual matter. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just need someone to settle tonight's balance. She hesitated, glancing around at the faces nearest to her, and then added the thing that changed the room. I explained to Mrs. Hartley when she came in to rebook, this is the first time in 20 years the account hasn't been under her father's name. Beverly's eyes moved to me briefly, almost apologetic. Every Christmas before this one, Mr. Briggs paid for the entire evening himself. The hall, the catering, the bar, the lighting, all of it. I just assumed, I'm sorry, I assumed someone had already spoken to him about tonight's balance. The room did the math. I watched it happen in real time, moving across face after face like a wave crossing water. You could see the moment each person understood, the small recalibration behind the eyes, the slight shift in posture, the involuntary turn of the head. Tom and Linda Caldwell, who had stood on their front porch and listened to Mitchell tell them, the old man just gets in the way, while I was around the corner of the fence with 4 folding chairs in my arms. They turned together and looked at the empty chair at the far end of the longest table, the one near the kitchen door, and then turned and looked at me. Patrice, the cousin, who had texted me the word selfish on a Thursday afternoon. I watched her set her drink down on the nearest table with a careful, deliberate movement, the way you set something down when your hands are not quite steady. The friends who had spent 20 years complimenting Carolyn on a beautiful party, asking her how she managed to pull it together so beautifully every year, marveling at her eye for detail and her organizational gift, they were looking at her now with an expression that was not admiration. And Mitchell had been wearing that loose, easy half-smile since I walked in the door, the smile of a man who was certain he still controlled the narrative, certain that one way or another this was going to resolve itself in his favor. I watched that smile come apart. Not quickly, Slowly, the way something structural gives way, one point of failure at a time, until there is nothing left, holding the shape. He looked at the Caldwells. The Caldwells looked at the floor. Carolyn stood frozen at the bar. Her audience, the audience she had cultivated and curated and performed for her entire adult life, was reassembling itself in real time around a truth she had kept buried for 2 decades. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Dad!" She started, her voice barely above a whisper. I never." "Let him finish hearing it," said a voice from somewhere in the middle of the room. "Everett." My son stepped out of the crowd in his work jacket, grease still in the creases of his knuckles, and he didn't raise his voice. He had learned that from me, I suppose, that you don't need volume when you have the truth on your side. "I want to say something," he said, looking around the room with steady eyes. "Since we're all here." Nobody moved. Nobody told him to sit down or pass the rolls or let people eat, for as long as I can remember. Everett said, "The story at Christmas was always the same. Dad ruined it. Dad got in the way. Dad made things awkward." His jaw tightened. I heard it so many times I almost started to believe it. He stopped and looked at Carolyn, not with anger, but with something heavier than anger, with the sorrow of a son who had watched something happen for years and not found the words to stop it. But nobody ever mentioned the other part. The man who supposedly ruined Christmas was the only reason any of us had one. He paid for all of it. His voice roughened, and he pressed through it. "The hall you're standing in, the food you ate tonight, the lights above your heads right now. He paid for every single piece of it. And we let him sit by the kitchen door and called him the problem." A woman near the back of the room pressed her hand over her mouth. One of Carolyn's friends from the neighborhood, a woman who had told me 3 years ago what a wonderful job Carolyn did putting this all together. Agnes stepped forward beside Everett. My sister, 66 years old, silver-haired and straight-backed, the woman nobody in this family had ever quite dared to dismiss. "Son, I have watched this for 20 years, she said, and her voice carried across the room without effort, clear and level and final. I held my tongue because I told myself it wasn't my place. It was my mistake, and I won't make it again." She looked directly at Carolyn, and her voice did not soften. "Your father is not the man who ruined Christmas. He is the man who gave you one quietly and completely every single year, while you stood at the front of the room and accepted the credit for it." Carolyn's eyes filled. The performance she had maintained through the entire evening, the gracious hostess, the in-control daughter, the woman who ran things, dissolved completely. Her chin trembled, her shoulders dropped. Behind the eyes that had been managing this room all night, there was just a frightened woman who had been found out and did not know what to do next. And for the first time in 20 years, nobody stepped in to rescue her. No gentle laugh to diffuse the moment. No hand on her arm to steer the conversation somewhere kinder. No voice from across the table telling everyone to let it go, it's Christmas past the rolls. The room waited. Everett looked at me across all those heads, across the ivory linens and the flowers and the warm white lights I had paid for every year since the year after Margaret died. "My dad never ruined Christmas," he said, his voice thick now, but holding. "My dad was Christmas." My chest cracked open like old timber in a cold snap, not breaking, just giving way to something that had been pressing against it for a very long time. I stood just inside the door with the snow still melting off my shoulders, and I felt 20 years of something shift and settle and finally begin to release. It was time for me to speak. I let my son's words settle over the room before I spoke. Not because I was gathering myself, I had been gathering myself for 20 years, and I was done with that. I let them settle because some things deserve a moment of quiet before the next thing comes, the way you let the last note of a song finish before you speak. I looked around the room, the faces I had known for years. Margaret's family, my family neighbors who had eaten food I had paid for at tables I had rented with linens I had ordered. Standing under lights I had contracted for in a hall I had booked every December since the year the world went quiet. And I decided the only way to keep my family was to keep the lights on for them. "I'm not here to embarrass anybody," I said. "That's not why I came tonight." My voice came out steady, lower than usual maybe. The voice I used when I meant every word and had thought about each one. 20 years ago, my wife Margaret passed away. I felt the room shift slightly at her name. There were people here who had known her, loved her, missed her. She loved Christmas more than any person I have ever known. After she was gone, I kept Christmas because it was the only way I knew to keep this family together. I paid for it because paying felt like love. Because as long as everyone came home for it, I could tell myself we were still a family. I paused and let that sit. What I understand now that I did not understand then is that you cannot buy your way into a family. You can only buy your way into being used. My voice tightened slightly on that last word, but I kept it even. And once you start paying for belonging, the people around you will let you. Not because they are bad people, because it is easy, because it is comfortable, because nobody ever sat them down and showed them the true cost of comfortable. I looked at Carolyn. She was crying now. Not performing, there was no performance left in her. Her mascara had tracked down both cheeks, and she had not moved to wipe it, which told me more about where she was than anything she could have said. Her hands were clasped in front of her fingers, pressed together hard, the way she had stood as a little girl when she was frightened and trying not to show it. My heart pulled toward her the way it always had. She was my daughter. She had been my daughter since the moment the nurse put her in my arms in the delivery room at the old Baptist hospital. And she had looked up at me with those dark eyes, and I had understood for the first time in my life that I would do anything in the world for this small person. I still would. Just not this. "I'm 63 years old," I said. "My heart is not what it was. And I am done buying a seat at a table where I am treated like I do not belong." I kept my eyes on Carolyn, not cruel, just finished. "I am not angry with you, but I am done paying to be the joke at the far end of the room." Mitchell made a sound, the beginning of something, an objection or a redirection, the reflexive move of a man who could not stand not managing a situation. I did not look at him. "Here is how it goes from now on," I said, and I kept my voice even and clear the way you keep a level when you need a true line. "Whoever hosts pays. That is only fair. That is how it works in every other family I have ever known." I looked around the room one more time at all the faces that had fed on my silence for 20 years. "And me, I will still come to Christmas. I will come every year for the rest of my life if I am wanted there as a father. Not as a checkbook. Not as the man you call when the bill comes due." I stopped. That is all I came to say. I turned toward the door. The snow was still falling beyond the glass panels at the entrance, soft and steady, covering the parking lot in a clean, undisturbed white. The kind of snow that does not apologize for itself. The kind that simply falls and covers what needs covering and makes the world look, if only for a little while, like it has been given a chance to begin again. Nobody stopped me. Not one person reached out a hand or called my name or moved to intercept me the way they had always moved, to smooth things over, to keep the peace, to make sure nobody left unhappy. For 20 years, that had been the unspoken agreement. Walter pays. Walter sits at the end of the table, and when things get uncomfortable, somebody steps in to make sure Walter does not make a scene on the way out. Tonight, there was no one to play that part. Because tonight, I was not making a scene. I was simply leaving. I pushed through the door and walked out into the cold. The air hit my face sharp and clean, and I stopped for a moment on the front step and breathed it in. The parking lot lights made halos in the falling snow. Somewhere behind me, I could hear the muffled sound of the room coming back to life, voices starting up again, the low, urgent hum of people processing something that had changed the shape of what they thought they knew. Everett came through the door behind me 30 seconds later. He said nothing. He fell into step beside me as we walked back across the lot to the trucks, our boots making the same 2 sets of prints in the snow that we had made on the way in. When we got to my truck, I stopped and stood for a moment with my hand on the door handle looking up at the sky. The snow was coming down straight, no wind, just falling clean, and even out of a sky the color of old pewter. "You all right?" Everett said quietly. I thought about it honestly before I answered. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." He nodded once. We got in our trucks. I pulled out of the Ridgeline parking lot for the last time as the man who paid for everything, and I drove home through the snow feeling lighter than I had felt in 20 years. Claire had kept the dinner warm. When Everett and I came back through the side door, the cold air coming in with us, the snow still on our shoulders, and our boots leaving wet prints across the mudroom tile. The kitchen hit us like a wall of everything good. Rosemary and roasting drippings and the bread rolls that Margaret had always said were the whole point of a holiday meal. Not the centerpiece, not the good china, just the smell of bread that somebody made in their own oven in their own house. Claire was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of tea, and her phone reading something with the relaxed concentration of a woman who had decided not to worry and had genuinely stuck to that decision. She looked up when we came in, took one look at our faces, and asked the only sensible question. "How did it go?" Everett and I looked at each other across the mudroom doorway. There was a whole conversation in that look, 20 years of history, one extraordinary hour, and the particular exhaustion that comes not from something going wrong, but from something finally going right after it has been wrong for far too long. "It went," I said. Claire studied us both for a moment, then nodded once the way a person nods when they have decided that is enough information for now, and they will get the rest later. She stood up and went to the oven without being asked. "Sit down," she said. "Both of you?" We sat. She pulled the turkey out, checked the rolls, got down 3 plates from the cabinet, and then stopped. Looked at them, looked at me, and said, "Do you mind if we just use paper? I think tonight calls for paper plates." I did not know exactly why that made me feel better, but it did. "Paper's fine," I said. So we ate at the kitchen table, the 3 of us, off paper plates with paper napkins, the good silverware. Because Claire had already set it out, and it seemed like a waste to put it back. The little cedar tree glowed in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, the faint, clean smell of Tennessee wood drifting through the house. Outside, the snow had come up past the bottom of the kitchen window and was still falling steady and unhurried, covering everything. For a while, we just ate. Nobody felt the need to fill the quiet. Then Everett set his fork down and pulled his roll apart with both hands, and I knew from the way he did it slowly, without purpose, the way a man handles something when his hands need to be doing something, while his mind catches up, that he was getting ready to tell me what had happened after I left. "The party didn't recover," he said. He said it the way you say something you knew was coming, and are still somehow sad to confirm. Not with any satisfaction in it. Just the plain, tired weight of a true thing. "Tell me," I said. He set the pieces of roll down on the plate and looked at them. "People stayed maybe 40 minutes after you walked out. Maybe not even that. You could feel the air go out of the room the second the door closed behind you, like someone had turned off the thing that was keeping everyone standing. He paused. The Caldwells went first. Linda said goodbye to Carolyn at the door. She was polite about it, but she didn't hug her. Tom shook nobody's hand, then two of the cousins, then most of the neighbors. Within the hour, it was just family and Beverly standing there with her folder. "How did Carolyn handle the bill?" I asked. Everett picked up one of the pieces of roll and turned it over in his fingers. "She put what she could on her visa right there at the bar. Beverly was patient about it. She set up a payment plan for the balance 2 months. He exhaled through his nose. Beverly was decent about the whole thing, actually. Didn't make it harder than it had to be. And Mitchell? I asked, though I already suspected the answer from the particular set of Everett's jaw. Mitchell tried to make the case that the booking had been Carolyn's decision, Everett said. That he hadn't been part of it. That she was the one who had assured everyone you would pay, so technically, he stopped. Shook his head. He said technically in front of 3 people who had just watched Beverly explain 20 years of your payments on a screen. I looked at my plate. "What did Carolyn do?" I asked. Everett's mouth moved in a way that was almost not quite a smile. "She told him very calmly in front of those same 3 people that he was welcome to explain his contribution to his real estate clients at the Caldwell's next neighborhood barbecue. Despite everything, despite the whole long wait of that evening, despite the 20 years behind it and the uncertain road ahead of it, I felt something loosen in my chest at that. Carolyn had her mother's tongue when she finally decided to pick it up and use it. Margaret had been the most gracious woman I had ever known, but she had never once in her life been anyone's doormat, and apparently that had not been entirely lost on our daughter. "How did she look?" I asked. At the end of it, when everyone had gone. Everett was quiet for a moment. He picked up his fork and set it back down without using it. "Tired," he said finally. Not angry, not embarrassed, just tired. Like someone who finished a race they had been running for 20 years and only realized when they crossed the line that they had been running in the wrong direction the whole time. He looked at me. "She'll be all right, Dad. It's going to take her a while, but she'll be all right." I ate the rest of my dinner thinking about that. 2 days after Christmas, I went out to the end of the driveway in my boots to get the mail and found among the usual post-holiday advertisements and one late Christmas card from a cousin in Nashville. A cream-colored envelope with my name written on it in careful handwriting. I recognized immediately. Linda Caldwell had beautiful penmanship, the kind that people learned in school before computers made it unnecessary. She had written my name and address in the center of the envelope with the same deliberate care she put into everything, and she had used a real stamp, not a printed label. I stood at the end of my driveway in the cold and opened it. Inside, on a simple ivory card, were 2 sentences in the same careful hand. "We are sorry for what we assumed about you, Walter. You always seemed like a good man, and now we know you are. Tom and Linda Caldwell." I read it twice. Then I folded it back into the envelope and stood there at the end of my snowy driveway for a moment longer than I needed to, looking at nothing in particular. My hands were not entirely steady when I finally walked back inside. Not because of the Caldwells themselves, Tom and Linda were good neighbors, but I had not spent 20 years losing sleep over their opinion of me. It was something else. It was the fact that they had seen me clearly, without my having paid for it, or performed for it, or smoothed anything over to earn it, and had put it in writing and sent it through the United States Postal Service with a real stamp on it, and it had landed in my mailbox on a Tuesday morning in December, and I had not had to do anything to deserve it, except be exactly who I was. That was new. After 20 years, that was entirely, completely new. I propped the card against the salt shaker in the middle of the kitchen table and left it there. I looked at it every morning with my coffee for a week. That same afternoon, the phone rang. Agnes calling from her landline the way she always did when she wanted to talk properly and not be distracted by the small screen. The version of the story going around town, she said, dispensing with hello the way Agnes always did when she had something to report, is no longer that you ruined Christmas. What's the version now? I asked. She paused for effect. Agnes had always had a sense of timing. Did you hear what that family did to that man for 20 years? She said it flat, and even the way you repeat something you have heard so many times, it has become a kind of rhythm. That is the version that is traveling Walter, from the Caldwells to their Tuesday book club, to at least half of West Knoxville by my count. I didn't want that, I said. And I meant it honestly without qualification. I know you didn't, she said. But the truth doesn't ask permission before it travels. Once it's out, you can't call it back. A beat. Mitchell is faring worse than Carolyn in the court of neighborhood opinion, if that means anything to you. Apparently Tom Caldwell has a great many friends who buy and sell commercial property. I did not feel triumphant about that. I want to be honest about it, the way I have tried to be honest about everything in this telling. The knowledge that Mitchell's careless words on his own patio had come back around on him, I did not celebrate it. I felt instead the gray, tired sadness of watching consequences fall on a person who had spent years pointing them at someone else. It was not satisfying. It was just true. That night, I sat in my living room with the cedar tree still lit in the corner, and a cup of decaf going cold on the side table, no television, just the quiet of the house and the snow still coming down outside, and my own company, which I was only now at 63 beginning to find sufficient. I thought about Carolyn, about what she was doing tonight in that house across town with Mitchell and 2 children and a credit card bill that bore her name. About whether she was eating dinner or just sitting somewhere turning the evening over in her mind the way I had been turning things over in mine for the better part of a month. My phone sat on the side table. I looked at it for a long moment. I left it there. Some things a person has to walk through entirely on their own. And the most loving thing you can do, the hardest thing, the thing that costs more than any check I ever wrote, is trust them enough to let them walk through it. 4 days after Christmas, my phone rang at 10 in the morning. Carolyn. I answered it on the second ring because this time I had been half expecting it. Not hoping, just expecting the way you expect rain when the sky has been the right color for 2 days running. Hi, Dad. Her voice was different. The brightness was gone, the practiced ease of a woman who always knew what she wanted before she picked up the phone. What was left was something quieter and more uncertain, a voice I had not heard from my daughter since she was very young. Can I come over, just me? Of course, I said. Come whenever you're ready. She came an hour later. She came alone, which told me everything I needed to know about where things stood between her and Mitchell. She was wearing jeans and a plain gray sweater and no jewelry except her wedding ring, and she looked like she had not slept well in several nights, which I suspected was true. She sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I had added up 20 years of receipts. The same table where Everett had shown me the text message. The same table that had seen most of the important moments of this particular December. And she wrapped both hands around the mug of coffee I set in front of her, and did not say anything for a little while. I sat across from her and let the quiet do its work. I had learned in 63 years that some silences need to finish before words will mean anything. I saw the numbers, she said finally. Her voice was low and careful, like she was testing the weight of each word before she put it down. All of them. Beverly showed me the full account history when I came in to rebook. 20 years of payments. All of them. She stopped. I never knew Dad. I want you to know that. I never once sat down and looked. I know, I said. I made it easy not to. She looked up at me. How? She asked, and her voice cracked slightly on the word. How did you make it easy? I should have asked. I should have looked. I'm 40 years old, and I never once asked who was paying for the party I was telling everyone I threw. Her eyes filled. What does that say about me? It says you trusted that it was handled, I said. Because I always handled it. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed. It's not. But it's true. She turned the coffee mug slowly in her hands. Everyone keeps asking me how I let it happen. My friends, Mitchell's sister, even my own cousin Patrice, who has some nerve considering she called you selfish in a text message. A short, wet laugh that surprised both of us. And I don't have a good answer. It was just always there. The party was always booked. The lights were always up. The cake was always exactly right. I never had to think about any of it. So I didn't. She pressed the back of her hand against her eye. Greg is furious, she said. Her voice changed on his name, harder, more tired. Not at himself. At me. He says I made him look like a fool in front of the whole neighborhood. She stopped. Like it was my job to keep him from saying the things he said. I heard what was underneath that. I chose not to pull on it yet. That was a thread she would need to pull herself in her own time. I don't know how to do this, she said, and now her voice broke fully, tears spilling over her cheeks without her trying to stop them. I don't know how to do Christmas without you handling it. I don't know how to plan things or pay for things, or I'm 40 years old, Dad, and I feel like I don't know how to do any of it. You did everything for so long that I never had to learn. Her shoulders shook. She pressed her fingers over her eyes and cried the way a person cries when they have been holding it in for days and have finally stopped fighting it, deep, unsteady, the kind of crying that sounds like it hurts. I sat across from her and let her cry. I did not reach across the table and offer to fix it. I did not open my banking app and transfer a number that would make the red on her credit card statement go away. I did not tell her I would handle next year just this once, just to get her back on her feet. I let her sit with it because she needed to sit with it. You will learn. I told her when the worst of it had passed, and she was wiping her face with the back of her hand. It is not complicated, Carolyn. You pick up the phone and you call the hall and you give them your card number. You call the bakery and you do the same. You look at the total and you decide what you can afford and what you can't. I kept my voice gentle. It's only impossible if no one ever makes you do it. She looked at me across the table with red-rimmed eyes and a face stripped of every bit of performance, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the little girl who used to climb into my lap when she had a bad dream and tuck her head under my chin and hold on. I'm sorry, Dad, she said quietly. I'm sorry it took me this long to see you. After she left, the old voice came back. It always came back, that soft, reasonable, loving voice that had cost me 20 years and was not done trying. She came to you. She said she was sorry. She's struggling. What would it hurt to help her this once? You have it. What is it for if not your children? I sat in my kitchen with that voice for a long time. Long enough that I picked up my phone and opened the banking app. Long enough that I had Carolyn's account number pulled up on the screen, my thumb hovering over the transfer button, the way it had hovered over her name on the phone that Thursday night, when the cousins were calling me selfish, and Agnes had not yet sent her message. It would have been so easy. 3 taps, and I was the man who fixed things again. The needed one. The hero of the morning after. My phone buzzed. A text from Everett. Short the way his texts always were. Don't do it, Dad. Whatever you're thinking right now, don't. I stared at that for a moment. Then another message came in, this one from Agnes. Saw her car at your place earlier. If she asked for money, the answer hasn't changed. I set the phone down on the table. I closed the banking app without transferring a single dollar. I sat in my kitchen in the quiet of the afternoon with the cedar tree still lit in the corner of the living room and the snow still on the ground outside, and I did the hardest thing I had done in this entire month. Harder than canceling the contracts. Harder than standing in that parking lot with Mitchell. Harder than walking into the ridgeline and saying what I said. I let my daughter sit with the weight of something she needed to carry. Because love, I was learning at 63, sometimes means trusting the people you love to stand on their own 2 feet. Even when every part of you wants to reach out and catch them. Even then, the things that crack keep cracking. That is simply what cracked things do. I heard about most of it from Everett, who heard pieces from Carolyn, who had stopped being careful about who she said things to. January came in cold and flat over Knoxville the way January always does, the Christmas trees dragged to the curb, the wreaths coming down off the front doors, the neighborhood returning to its ordinary face after a month of trying to look its best. There is a particular emptiness to the first week of January that has nothing to do with the cold and everything to do with the distance between what you hoped the holidays would be and what they actually were. This January had that feeling in abundance. Everett stopped by on a Tuesday evening, in the second week of the month, still in his work shirt, the garage logo on the chest, his boots leaving a little trail of dried salt across my kitchen floor from the parking lot at Briggs Auto. He sat down at my table the way he had been sitting down at my table since he was old enough to pull out his own chair without ceremony, without announcement, like a man who knew he was welcome and did not need to make a production of it. I poured him a coffee without asking. He wrapped both hands around the mug. They had a real fight, he said. No preamble. He had his grandfather's habit of getting straight to the thing. I figured, I said. I sat down across from him. Not a smooth-it-over-by-morning fight. A real one. The kind that doesn't get patched up with an apology and a week of being polite to each other. He turned the mug slowly in his hands. It started with the credit card statement. The ridgeline balanced the bakery Eleanor's flowers. All of it landed on her January statement at once. Mitchell saw the total and wanted to know what her plan was for handling it. And Carolyn said, I asked. Everett's mouth tightened slightly. She told him that was a very interesting question coming from the man who had stood on their own back patio and told the Caldwells that she carried the whole thing herself every year. I wrapped my hands around my own mug and said nothing. Mitchell said that was different. Everett continued. That he was just talking, making conversation with the neighbors. That she was the one who had told everyone you would pay like always, and if she had... He stopped. His jaw worked for a moment. His exact words, Dad. He said if she had managed you better, none of this would have happened. The phrase landed on the table between us and sat there. Managed you better. I looked at my coffee. I thought about 20 years of being managed. The smile at the planning meeting. The hand on my arm at dinner. The gentle phone calls the morning after asking me to cover just one more thing. All of it management. All of it so smooth and so practiced that I had spent 2 decades mistaking it for family. What did she say to that? I asked. Some of it I won't repeat. Everett said, because it wasn't kind, and I don't think she'd want it repeated. But the part that matters. He looked up at me. She told him she was done being the person who managed everyone else so that he never had to manage anything. And that if he wanted to open a conversation about who had been carrying what in their marriage, she had a lot of time and a great deal to say on the subject. I looked at my son across the kitchen table. 36 years old engine grease in the creases of his knuckles that no amount of washing entirely removed the most honest face I had ever known. "Good for her," I said quietly. Everett nodded. There it was. The alliance that had held me at the far end of the table for 20 years, turning on itself the moment the money was gone and the neighbors had stopped being impressed. Two people who had built something together on the foundation of someone else's resources, finding out what was actually load-bearing the moment the foundation was removed. It was not a surprise. It was not a victory either. It was just the plain structural truth of a thing finally showing itself. Where are they now?" I asked. "Same house," Everett said. "Not the same life." She moved her things into the guest room. She told me they're either talking about counseling or talking about not talking. She doesn't know yet which direction it's going. He paused. She seemed calmer than I expected. Not happy, just settled into it. Like she'd already accepted that it was what it was. "That's between them," I said. And this time, I meant it completely all the way through, with nothing held back. It was between them. It had always been between them. I had spent 20 years inserting myself into the middle of their dynamic as the source of funding that kept everything smooth, and all I had done was delay the reckoning that was always coming. The glue had not been holding anything together. It had just been covering the cracks so nobody had to look at them. Mitchell's having a rough stretch at work." Everett added, not with any pleasure in his voice, just reporting a fact. "The Caldwells apparently have a significant number of friends in commercial real estate. A Saturday afternoon on a back patio turns out to have a longer reach than he calculated. I did not celebrate that. I want to be clear about that, because it would be easy to read satisfaction into it, and there was none. Watching Mitchell's professional reputation suffer the consequences of his own words, that was not something I had wanted or engineered. It was simply a domino falling that had been leaning for a long time. I felt no triumph. I felt the low, tired sadness of a man who had watched something preventable become inevitable and could not go back and change any of it. I did not call Mitchell. I did not call Carolyn and tell her to reconsider or give it more time, or remember the children. I sat in my kitchen with my son, and I drank my coffee, and I trusted my daughter for the first time in her adult life to figure out her own. That was new. I was slowly coming to understand what love actually looked like when it was not trying to purchase anything. March came in milder than February, the way March usually does in East Tennessee. The snow retreating from the garden beds in patches, the first thin green showing at the edges of things that had been brown and frozen since November. Carolyn called on a Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen when the phone rang, standing at the window watching the light move across the backyard. Margaret's rosemary on the windowsill, putting out new growth, the way it did every spring, reaching toward the glass, like it knew the sun was there and intended to find it. I answered, and the voice on the other end was different. Not the bright, managed voice of a woman who always knew what she wanted before she picked up the phone. Not the exhausted, stripped-down voice of January. Something newer than both. Something tentative and careful and quietly, genuinely proud. "Dad," she said, "I just wanted to tell you something." "All right," I said. "Tell me, will you? I filed our taxes this year, by myself. I called a CPA over on Kingston Pike, sat down with her for 2 hours, went through every document, asked every question I didn't understand." A pause. "I understood all of it by the time we were done. The whole thing." Her voice went a little smaller on the next part the way it did when she was saying something that mattered to her and was not sure how it would land. I know that's not a big thing, but it felt like a big thing. It is a big thing, I said. For someone doing it for the first time, it is exactly as large as it feels. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. She was quiet for a moment. I heard her exhale slowly. I also called Ridgeline, she said. Beverly, actually. I made a reservation for next Christmas, in my own name, on my own card. Another pause, and in it I could hear her steadying herself to say the next part without apologizing for it. It's a smaller package than what you always booked. A lot smaller. But I picked it myself and I'm paying for it myself. Something in my chest went warm in a way that had nothing to do with the coffee I was holding. Good, I said. You're not disappointed, she asked. That it's smaller. Carolyn. I said her name gently. The only kind worth having is the kind that belongs to you. She let out a breath that sounded like something releasing. After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen window for a long time, with the phone still in my hand, watching the early spring settling in over the backyard. The bird bath was uncovered again, the snow melted away, the cast-iron cardinal catching the afternoon light. Margaret's rosemary reached toward the glass, putting out new green the way it always had, patient and stubborn and quietly certain that the light was worth reaching for. Margaret would have done this 20 years sooner, Agnes had said. Maybe. But Margaret had not been the one who needed to learn it. I had. And here I was, at 63, finally learning it. Better late than never, Margaret would have said, smiling at me from across the kitchen with flour on her hands, and that particular look in her eyes that meant she already knew the answer, and was just waiting for me to catch up. She would have been right. She was almost always right about the things that actually mattered. The second Christmas looked nothing like the 20 before it. There was no banquet hall, no catering company, no rental linens, no lighting crew from Southern Glow stringing warm white bulbs along the rafters of a room I would never sit at the center of. There was my house, the one Margaret and I had bought when the roof needed replacing, and we couldn't afford to fix it, the one I had kept warm for everyone else for 20 years, and was only now learning to keep warm for myself. I hosted, small and deliberate and entirely my own. I started cooking on the morning of December 23rd because I wanted the house to smell right for 2 full days before anyone arrived. Turkey in the oven low and slow the way Margaret had taught me. Cranberry sauce from scratch. The rolls from refrigerated dough that you bake yourself, because the smell of bread rising was the point, not the bread. I found Margaret's handwritten recipe card for her sweet potato casserole in the back of the recipe box, her handwriting on an index card. Faded blue ink, her particular way of writing the letter G that I had forgotten, and then suddenly remembered completely when I saw it. And I made that too, following her instructions, as carefully as I had ever followed a wiring diagram. Agnes arrived first, the way Agnes always arrived first, because Agnes believed that being on time was a form of love, and being early was even better. She came through the front door in her good coat and a pair of earrings she saved for occasions, took one look at my kitchen, and immediately began reorganizing the counter space. "You've got the rolls too close to the oven," she said. "They'll overproof." "They've been fine there for 30 years, I said. "And they've been fine there for 30 years because Margaret compensated." She moved them to the far counter without asking permission. "I am compensating now. You're welcome." I laughed. It came out of me easily the way laughter comes when you are not performing anything, just genuinely caught off guard by someone you love being exactly themselves. Everett arrived at noon with Claire, who came through the door carrying a pecan pie she had made herself and a bottle of good sparkling cider, and who kissed me on the cheek when she came in, the way a person does when they have decided they belong somewhere and are not asking permission about it. Everett had engine grease on his left wrist that he had not quite gotten off, and he shook my hand and then pulled me into a hug that lasted a beat longer than usual, the way hugs do when the person giving them means it all the way through. "Merry Christmas, Dad," he said into my shoulder. "Merry Christmas, son," I said. At 2 o'clock, there was a knock at the front door. I opened it and found Carolyn on the porch. She was alone. No Mitchell. She was wearing a simple navy coat. I did not recognize her hair, down no jewelry except small gold earrings I had given her for her 30th birthday. In her hands, she was carrying a casserole dish covered in aluminum foil, slightly lopsided on one side, where the lid didn't quite fit, and a bottle of sparkling grape juice for the grandchildren. "Hi, Dad," she said. Her voice was careful and genuine at the same time, the way a person's voice sounds when they are trying very hard to say exactly what they mean and nothing else. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Come in out of the cold." She came in. She set the casserole on the counter and looked around the kitchen, at the cedar tree visible in the living room corner, at Agnes reorganizing my cabinet, at Claire setting the table with the good plates she had found in the cabinet and decided to use without being asked. "Can I help with something?" Carolyn asked. Not "can you handle something?" Not "who's taking care of the just can I help?" "You can set out the serving spoons," Agnes said, without turning around. "They're in the second drawer." Carolyn found the drawer, found the spoons, and set them out beside each dish without commentary or direction. She did not take over. She did not produce a clipboard from somewhere. She just helped the way a person helps in a kitchen that is not theirs and knows it. The grandchildren arrived with Carolyn, her 2 kids, 8 and 6, in their good clothes, and already vibrating with the particular energy of children who know presents are involved and are exercising heroic self-control about it. They came through the door and went straight to the cedar tree in the corner and crouched in front of it, pointing at ornaments and asking questions. The 6-year-old, a girl named Lily, who had Margaret's dark eyes and her grandmother's habit of saying exactly what she was thinking, looked up at me with great seriousness. "Grandpa Walter," she said, "your tree is very small." "It is," I agreed. "Why is it small?" "Because it belonged to your great-grandmother," I said. "And she always said the best things in life don't need to be big to be important." Lily considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. "Like me," she said. "Exactly like you," I said. She seemed satisfied with that and went back to examining the ornaments. We sat down to eat at 4 o'clock, all of us around the table that had, in another life, been just big enough for Margaret and me, and 2 small children arguing over who got the drumstick. Agnes sat across from Everett and told a story about a Christmas in 1987 when our father had tried to fry a turkey in the backyard and nearly burned down the fence. And Everett laughed so hard he had to set down his fork and press both hands against his face. And Claire laughed, watching Everett laugh, and even Carolyn laughed. Really laughed. Not the practiced social laugh I had spent 20 years hearing, but the unguarded kind that made her look like she was 12 years old again. After dinner, while the grandchildren were running circles around the living room in the particular sugar-fueled frenzy of children after a holiday meal, and while Everett was washing dishes, despite my telling him he didn't have to, and his telling me he knew that, but was doing it anyway, Carolyn found me standing at the living room window. She came and stood beside me. We looked out at the snow coming down over the backyard, together, steady and soft, the same snow that had been falling over Knoxville every December, for as long as I could remember, covering Margaret's garden beds, filling the birdbath, turning the world outside clean and quiet. Carolyn did not say anything for a moment. I let the quiet sit between us without rushing it. Then she said softly, "I owe you more than I can say. I know that. I'm not going to try to say all of it tonight because I'd get it wrong and you deserve better than me getting it wrong." "You don't have to," I started. "I do," she said. "Just one part. Just this." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were wet, and this time she did not try to manage it or redirect it or turn it into something else. She just let me see her. "Thank you, Dad," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "For all of those years, I never once said it. I never even saw it." Her chin trembled slightly, and she pressed through it. "I'm sorry it took losing it for me to finally see you standing right there." There was no favor writing behind it, no clipboard under her arm, no project she needed handled, no balance she needed covered, no version of this that was about anything other than a daughter telling her father the truth, 20 years late and meaning every word. I had waited a long time to hear that, longer than I had let myself admit. "I forgive you," I said, not because she had earned it perfectly, not because everything was fixed or even close to fixed, but because carrying unforgiveness was heavier than setting it down, and I was 63 years old and done carrying things that were not mine to carry. She made a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a laugh, the sound a person makes when relief and grief arrive at the same moment, and they do not know which one to feel first. I put my arm around my daughter, and she leaned into me the way she had not leaned since she was small, and we stood together at the window and watched the snow fall over Knoxville. It did not cost me a single thing. It was worth more than every check I had ever written. Later, after the grandchildren had fallen asleep on the couch in a tangle of stockings and wrapping paper, and after Claire had quietly covered them with the quilt from the hall closet without being asked, and after Agnes had declared the kitchen clean enough to meet her standards and accepted a cup of decaf, we sat together in the living room in the light of the cedar tree and talked about nothing in particular, about Everett's garage, about a trip Claire wanted to take to the Smoky Mountains in the spring, about a movie Agnes had seen and wanted to argue about with anyone who would engage her. It was the most ordinary evening I could imagine, and it was the best Christmas I had had in 20 years. One by one they left. Agnes first with her leftover pie and her good coat, and a squeeze of my arm that said everything she did not need to put into words. Claire and Everett next, Claire hugging me at the door, and Everett pausing on the porch step and turning back. "Hey, Dad," he said. "Yeah." He looked at me in the porch light, snow falling behind him, his breath coming out in small clouds in the cold air. "I just wanted to say." He stopped, started again. "I'm glad you're my dad. I know I don't say that enough." My throat went tight in the way it had been going tight all evening, that particular tightness that is not pain but is something adjacent to it, the feeling of being full of something good and not quite having enough room for all of it. "I know you are," I said. "I'm glad you're mine." He nodded once, the way his grandfather used to nod when something was settled, and walked to his truck. Last was Carolyn. She bundled her sleeping children into their coats and carried Lily to the car herself, the little girl's head heavy and warm on her shoulder, and came back for her son, and then came back one more time to get the casserole dish she had almost forgotten. She stopped in the doorway on her way out. Next year," she said. "Can we do this again, here like this?" "Yes," I said. "We can do this every year." She nodded. She started to turn away, then turned back one more time. "Dad, for what it's worth." She paused. "You were never the man who ruined Christmas. I think you know that now." Her voice went soft. But I wanted to say it out loud, so you could hear it. I stood in my doorway and watched her carry her son to the car and strap him in and drive away into the snow, the red taillights disappearing around the corner at the end of the street. Then I went back inside and closed the door against the cold. I stood for a moment in the hallway of my own house, the house Margaret and I had chosen together. The house I had kept lit for everyone else for 20 years. The house that was finally, simply, and completely mine. The grandchildren's wrapping paper was still on the living room floor. The cedar tree was still glowing in the corner. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and bread, and the sweet potato casserole made from a recipe in Margaret's handwriting on a faded index card. I walked to the living room and stood in front of the cedar tree for a moment. Margaret's tree. The one that leaned slightly to the left because she had said the best things in life are always reaching for something. I touched one of the low branches with one finger lightly, the way you touch something you want to make sure is still real. Then I turned off the tree, and the room went soft and dark, and I went to bed. For the first time in 20 years, I did not lie awake staring at the ceiling. I closed my eyes and I slept the way a free man sleeps, deeply, quietly, without anything left unpaid. Here is what I learned, and I will give it to you plain. You cannot buy your way into someone's respect. You can only buy your way into being used. I spent 20 years handing over pieces of myself and calling it love. It was not love. It was fear that if I stopped paying, I would stop belonging. The day I stopped writing the checks was the day I started being a father again. If you are out there carrying your family in silence, paying for rooms where you are treated like furniture, smoothing over things that should not be smoothed, please hear me. Do not wait 20 years the way I did. God gives us one life, and not a single dollar of it is worth trading for a seat at a table where you are not truly welcome. These grandpa stories do not get told enough. The quiet men, the ones who keep the lights on while everyone else takes the bows. I was one of them for too long. This is my family revenge story. I am not proud of how long it took me, but I am proud of how it ended. If any part of this reached you, leave me a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if these grandpa stories mean something to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. Please note some upcoming stories on this channel contain fictional elements crafted purely for reflection and life lessons. If that is not for you, no hard feelings, step away and find what fits you best. But if you stay, I promise to always make it worth your time.